And I'll call the meeting to order. With that, we'll go around the room for people to introduce themselves.
I'm Scott Kelly, Alderperson.
Dean Benneman, Alderman and committee member.
Okay.
Thad Kubishak, Alderperson, District 7.
Jake Katnow, committee member.
Okay, with that, we're going to somewhat jump around in order maybe here, but the DPW report, to move along, we all have that in our minutes and that, and it's posted on the website and that, so if we just go past that and do it that way this evening. And with that then, if that's okay, item 3 would be to review the crushing contract proposals. Joe?
Thank you. So on the sheet that I just handed out, we had 4 bids received. Initially, the low apparent bid was Go Green and Quarry for $121,500. Unfortunately, there were a number of questions that the engineering department had. Their package was not complete, and despite many efforts to both email and call them, they were non-responsive. So staff's recommendation then to award the lowest qualified bidder would be to PGA Incorporated for a total of $149,000.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Mr. Kubishak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Terry, I guess without doing a little bit more research on this, the sheet that you had passed out here, is there 3 different items on here? Because I'm kind of looking at the unit quantity bid. PGA has got $4,000, and then Earth and Opelt have got $2,500. If that's a case where budgeted, if our budgeted amount is, then we would like to reach that budget amount if we had more to be able to crush. But if it's the unit quantity and the unit quantity is more, can you quick explain what you passed out here for us?
Sure. So there is a mobilization that's a lump sum. That's no matter how much they would crush. We propose then to crush 10,000 yards of 3/4 inch and 20,000 yards of 1 1/4 base course. We believe that's what we have on the stockpile out there. And the actual amounts that would be paid are based on the unit price. And so at the end of the project, once the material is crushed, it is surveyed, and those quantities then are agreed upon between the city and the contractor for the final payment. So it is a unit price type agreement, and we do everything we can to fall within the quantities that were let for bid.
What is our budgeted amount for this?
Unfortunately, I don't have that answer for you right now. This is within our budget.
That's fine. So if it's a case where we're not on the hook for the total amount because of that unit quantity, for example, if we estimated high and that's not what we had, then
right,
we would be charged less because
that is correct.
Anybody else? Jay?
So, just 2 quick things. One, do you know anything about this PGA, and do you have a timeline?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why I asked Chairperson Rayom to hold this meeting tonight, is that in the contract agreements, the timeline gets this material crushed in time for our Washington Street project that is going to be undertaken this summer. And by the contract, if they sign it, they'll have to meet those requirements.
Anybody else? Anybody? Otherwise, I'd make a motion to approve the proposal for PGA for $149,000.
Second.
Motion second. Anybody else have anything to ask or questions? Hearing none. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. With that, Joe, would you want to go over the degradation ordinance? What's there?
Sure. I guess if it's okay with the committee, just because, and I apologize, I am pressed for time, and this all may not take as much time as we need. The other items that are critical for us to move our projects forwards are item number 6 and 7. So with the chairperson's permission, I'd like to jump forward to those, if that's okay.
If nobody has any objection to that, that's okay with me. We can go to 6. Item 6, and item 6 would be to review the West Jackson Street design for traffic control options at 6th Street. Also, so everybody knows that the note just above that is the committee may walk to West Jackson Street to review the next two items. And so if anybody wants to walk outside, we can do that, but if you're okay and satisfied with, we can just talk about it in here. So, committee, if it's okay to stay in, with that, we'll stay in, so we'll just talk about that, Joe, so if you want to just
Sure. So real briefly, as part of the design of the West Jackson Street project, at the intersection of West Grand, we were looking at 4 alternatives. One alternative is a no-build, the existing geometry. Alternative, well, it's listed as number 2, but alternative 1 is a reduced traffic signal. Alternative number 2 is a single-lane roundabout. And alternative number 3 is an all-way stop. Our consultant presented level of service comparisons for all 3 of those designs, including the no-build, and upon review, we have the following preliminary takeaways. The no-build is the existing pre-timed signal, and if you've driven that, you know that it's the most inefficient alternative. You don't really need the report to tell you that. There's more lanes than required to accommodate the forecasted traffic volume. Pedestrians have the longest crossing distance of evaluated alternatives, and what's not listed here is the city continues to receive complaints that signals maybe aren't working because some of the long delays that are experienced on West Grand Avenue. Alternative 1, the reduced traffic signal. A travel lane in each direction is removed on West Jackson Street to narrow the roadway and provide improved conditions for pedestrians and bicycles. The 4 hours of count data provided by the city was reviewed, and it appears that this intersection no longer meets traffic signal warrants. Traffic signals are typically cheaper to install than roundabouts. However, they do have higher life cycle costs. Alternative number 2 is a single lane roundabout. While this does provide the best operation, it will have the potential to reach gridlock during train crossing events, as drivers will not be able to see around the center island to know if vehicles are queuing into the circulating roadway. This alternative will likely require some right-of-way acquisition, and roundabouts are typically more expensive than traffic signals initially, but have less life cycle costs. The third alternative is an all-way stop. The all-way stop has reduced geometry similar to alternate 1. A travel lane in each direction is removed on West Jackson. The intersection operates at a level of service A or B during the peak hours, which is excellent. It's expected to be the lowest cost construction and ongoing maintenance. Because all 4 approaches must stop, vehicles will be less likely to enter the intersection and block it during a train event if they see queued vehicles. And there is some geometry indicated. So overall, between staff and our consultant, we recommend the alternative 3, which is an always stop control. And we're asking the committee to approve make a motion to approve the always stop control as the selected design option for the intersection of West Grand Avenue and West Jackson Street.
Any Jake?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment and then a question. So we did this up at Lincoln Street in East Grand. I travel through there frequently. I feel like it's been much better since it's went to the four-way stop. But that's just my own personal knowledge. Has there been any issues with that, switching from traffic lights to the four-way stop up there, or has that went smoothly?
It has gone smoothly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, with that, I'm in favor with, along with staff, of the four-way stop. I think that's been great up at Lincoln and East Grand. So if there's no further questions, I'd make a motion to approve alternative 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And I'm in favor of it. I just want to make a comment first. The roundabout, I think, would probably be the best way to go. But with the train tracks that we have, that the all-way stop is probably what should be done in this case. And so I would agree with that, with the motion and second. And so is there any other questions or comments by anybody? If not, committee, we can vote. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. And item number 7 is, again, review with West Jackson Street typical cross-section options. Joe?
All right, so the reason why we're bringing this to the committee is that let me get to the right page on my sheet here, is that the city ordinance defines typical cross-sections for our arterial streets. And because of the right-of-way width that exists here, we're not quite able to fit a typical section in. And so there were several different sections presented, and staff has reviewed them and is recommending a section that is shown there. We're showing a typical 81-foot right-of-way here on the left side. There'd be a half a foot behind the sidewalk, potentially a 5 or 10-foot sidewalk if there's a desire for a pedestrian bicycle. We can accommodate that, or we don't have to. Room for the single lane of traffic, and then a center median space that can act as refuge for left turn movements, for getting around a stalled vehicle. That curb and gutter in the center would be mountable curb, and in all likelihood that 16-foot piece in the middle would be paved. That doesn't need to be decided right now, but the typical section with 14-foot lanes is what we're looking to recommend for this geometry through here.
Questions?
I'm sorry.
Questions from anybody? Mr. Kubitschek?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Terry, I'm looking at page, I guess there isn't any page numbers, but I'm looking at the cross-section of what you just talked about for a typical section. Which way is north, or which is the north side, which is the south side? The right-of-way where it's only got half a foot from the sidewalk, or is this like the universe?
It's pretty universal, but the objective would be that would likely be the south side.
The side that would be like facing the Boys and Girls Club?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. there's still plenty of time to discuss whether or not, multi-use, wider, that 10-foot section is desired, or if we want just a standard sidewalk in that area. That there's still time to discuss that, but for the general preparation of plans, what we're really looking for is to define this. So really, the defining structure here is that it is a 1-lane, 14-foot lane, with a total of 20 feet in the middle, including that curb and median area, which is, this is a narrower section. That's what we're looking to do throughout. The traffic volume doesn't warrant as many lanes as we currently have. And then this fits in nicely. We can include some boulevard space, and it just opens up the road, makes it feel a little less heavy urban.
I guess I don't have any questions or anything. Does anybody else have any?
So what are you looking for in a motion here?
So just looking for a motion to approve the cross-section for West Jackson as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the cross-section for West Jackson Street as presented.
Second.
We have the motion and second to approve what's in front of us here this evening. Is there any other questions or anything? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. And let's see. We went past the referral list, and I gotta find the right sheet on that. It's in here somewhere. I didn't have anything to remove or whatever, just find it again. And if anybody had anything to add to it or whatever, and there's a...
I think, Alderperson Rayom, there was a request to add consideration for the guardrail at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and
Yep.
10th Avenue.
Yep. We can add that, yep, you're right. We talked about it, I should have remembered it. So that'll be on our next meeting agenda, more than likely. I think the only one we got left, Joe, was to review the degradation ordinance. You wanted to talk a little bit about that or not, or this evening?
Yeah, I think so. So this is a review of Chapter 6.24 in degradation costs. The city has had a degradation component in its ordinance code, and it's related to disturbing a street surface and the cost to the community when utilities, both city-owned and non-city-owned utilities, have to cut into a street. And the actual depreciation of the pavement, the shortened life, the additional maintenance costs. The language and the formulas in the current ordinance do not recoup real costs associated with the damage to public rights-of-ways, long-term maintenance costs, and reduced service life of streets. Furthermore, the depreciated life of the streets is currently indicated in the ordinance at 20 years, whereas most city streets are being maintained to last over 50. Utilities have a right to use the public right-of-way. When those utilities need to repair, the restoration work done by the utilities often does not result in a repair that restores the right-of-way to its pre-existing condition. Over time, ride quality suffers. The street needs additional maintenance throughout the remaining life of the street, and the street has a shorter useful life. The oversight of utility restorations are hampered by the city's inability to fully inspect backfill compaction and surface replacement to ensure it meets the city's quality specifications. The shortened life of the street, curb, or sidewalk is a significant liability for the taxpayers and residents. An appropriate degradation fee schedule places economic accountability where it belongs and can encourage utilities to perform pavement restoration rather than maintenance-intensive patches. Additionally, levy limits prohibit the city from expanding pavement maintenance activities without sacrificing other services. To maintain a sustainable street network and fund future street repairs resulting from utility excavations, the degradation component in the code needs updating. So staff recommendations, the degradation component of the code should be updated to regulate repair size, timing, materials, finish quality, fee structure, exceptions, use of fees, and permit requirements. For the repair size, based on staff evaluation of city practices, the review of other municipal practices, and observing problems in the field, staff recommends asphalt repairs be made a minimum width of 1/2 of the roadway from the center line of the roadway and a minimum length of 10 feet. If there's another patch within 10 feet of the proposed patch, the proposed patch shall include removing the pre-existing patch and repairing the areas as one patch. Concrete repairs shall consist of replacing a full concrete panel. For timing, for repair timing, staff recommends that street repairs due to a utility excavation be conducted immediately upon completion of the utility work. Weather and other conditions may not allow utilities to make permanent repairs immediately. And if such conditions exist, and upon approval from the engineering department, the utility may maintain an aggregate patch for up to 2 weeks at the utility's expense. A temporary asphalt or concrete shall be used for patches that cannot be permanently repaired within 2 weeks. We're recommending that a failure for a utility to maintain a temporary patch suitable for traffic, that's no potholes, would result in the city conducting maintenance activities, charging the utility for maintenance and administrative fees, and worst case could be cited for violation of this proposed ordinance. For materials, staff's recommending that utilities shall use an MT type asphalt mix or concrete placed in accordance with the city's paving specifications. Asphalt shall be placed in 2 lifts unless approved by the city engineer. Concrete shall be tied to existing panels and of a mixed design consistent with city specifications and approved by the city engineer. For finish quality, we're looking for a ride standard. Staff recommends the city expect utilities to make repairs to meet road quality standards that generally allow twice the variation as new road standards. Excessive vertical deviations result in a rough ride and can be a sign of poor quality control. Staff recommends using a straight edge, that any repair profile should not exceed 1/2 inch of vertical surface variation over the length of the patch, and no more than 1/4 inch over 10 feet. Failure to meet these standards would require the repair to be reconstructed at the utility's expense. So we also have a fee component. Upon evaluating fees based on the depreciation of pavement, service life of the street, and a patch, the staff is recommending a schedule as follows. The degradation fee would equal the cost of the surface to repair, maintain, times the depreciation factor, times the area. The cost to repair, maintain the street surface shall be calculated annually by the city engineer to represent an average cost to saw, remove, replace aggregate, and replace. For 2020, this has been calculated and proposed to be for asphalt pavement, $12.22 a square foot. For concrete pavement, $15.62 a square foot. For concrete sidewalk, $5.50 a square foot. And curb and gutter, $25.20 per linear foot. Depreciation factor. So the current formula contains a depreciation factor, and that's recommended to continue. The intent of a depreciation factor is to accurately portray the value lost for the remaining life of the street. However, it is challenging for a utility to determine potential costs and proposed methods if they cannot easily anticipate their costs. And they won't be able to anticipate those costs if they don't know the date the street was constructed. And as a result, after looking at typical repairs, the staff is recommending using a constant depreciation factor as follows. For asphalt pavement, it's 0.45, so 45% of the total. For concrete, it's recommended at 0.45%, but that could be lowered to 0.25% if the contractor provides documented quality assurance and quality control that they're meeting city specifications. Concrete sidewalk is at 50%, curb and gutter 50%, and any sod would be 100%. The area in the calculation is the measured area of the patch, meeting the proposed minimum sizes. In the document, I show an example of an asphalt street, 10 foot wide, 20 foot long on a 36 foot wide street. So the minimum patch size would be 16 feet, the width of from the center line to the edge. By the 20 foot length, that's 320 square feet. So the degradation fee for this example would be $1,759.68. There would be some proposed exceptions. There'd be no degradation fees charged for normal street repair maintenance by the city or for existing utility assets that without repair would result in a rough ride or potential hazard. For example, traffic loops, pavement repairs around castings, water valves, manholes, catch basins, adjusting ring replacement, etc. The exception for a minimum patch size for these types of repairs would result in a repair that's 2 foot greater than the asset that's being repaired. We also propose that no degradation fees would be charged on streets that have an existing preliminary resolution approved. That's when we want utilities to be making upgrades, is, you know, once the city's planning on repairing the street. I mean, that's when we want them there. And there'd be no degradation fees where utility chooses to perform restoration. And restoration is defined as replacing all of the paved surface around the utility excavation on at least one side of the center line for an entire block. Essentially, that street's been rehabilitated, and again, no need for any degradation fees because it's been restored maybe better than its existing condition. The proposed use of fees is we're proposing that a fund be established and designated for street reconstruction, mill and fill projects, or repairing failed utility repairs. Permit requirements are similar to what they would be now. Right-of-way excavation permit shall be applied for and issued by the city engineer prior to work being performed. Degradation fees would be in addition to administrative permit fees. Fees would double if work begins without a right-of-way permit, or if a right-of-way permit is not applied for within 48 hours of emergency excavation under the state's definition of emergency. So, for example, water main repair, gas service or gas main repair, something like that. Those utilities just go to work. But within 48 hours of starting that work, they'd have to notify the city and obtain the appropriate permits. So we're looking to request the committee to take action to make a motion to update Chapter 6 as described and bring ordinance language to the Common Council for discussion. I did not prepare that language in the event that this may take time to discuss and if there's changes desired. It would be financed through the city's, the city's general fund would receive additional utility revenue to offset diminished life of roadways. Utilities, including the city's utilities, would experience some costs, and they would have to finance them through their operational budgets and fee structures. That would be the city's stormwater utility, wastewater utility, electric utility, and water utility. And that concludes the report.
Questions? Mayor?
I guess in your consideration, so I'll talk myself into a circle here, but some of my concern is, if it's our local water and light utility, if we are charging them for degradation fees that obviously eventually it's going to be passed on to the ratepayers. So we're going to end up paying in a roundabout way as taxpayers and ratepayers to fund those fees. So I don't know if it's looking at that utility differently than, say, the gas utility. That's just something I think should be discussed in your discussion, that we're all going to end up as ratepayers and the taxpayers paying for it either way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Catnaugh.
Thank you. To that point, I would say that the surrounding communities also use the roads and are ratepayers and use Wisconsin Rapids roads probably more than we use their roads. I'm actually in favor of this. I feel like this would swing it more in a fair way to pay for these degradation fees. As Joe mentioned, I mean, the way it's structured right now, just the one fact of we're only looking at the life of a street of 20 years when we all know that we wish we could replace our streets every 20 years, but that's not the case. So I'm in favor of this. I'm not going to make a motion right away. I'll leave it open for discussion, but that's where I feel on this.
Anybody else? Mr. Kubiszak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Is there anybody that wants to speak on behalf of this from the audience at all? I will recognize Mr. Elliott.
Come forward, please. Thank you.
Josh Elliott from Water and Light. Just like to make sure that we take into account that, as the mayor said, this will impact the ratepayers directly through rate increases as it would taxpayers. So we kind of ran some numbers. This would generate, over the last 4 years, about $160,000 in additional costs. So I think if we can figure out a way to restore the roads properly, we can eliminate the across the board ordinance. That's up to you guys, I guess. Anyone has any questions for me? No? Okay.
I don't, go ahead, Jake.
So when you say if we can figure out a way to restore the roads properly, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm assuming this is driven from bad patching. I would contend that we could improve the city with better way to ensure compaction, and that we don't actually degrade the road. In any case, we can lead to improvement.
My follow-up question would be, I mean, why, if that's an option, why haven't we been doing that as a city and a utility already?
So I think the utility's been doing generally a good job. There are times when it may seem like a utility, for me, that maybe a utility repair is rushed, not necessarily at the fault of any particular utility. Sometimes it's weather conditions, things like that. You know, and I'm proposing, and everybody's right, Mayor Blazer and Josh from Water and Light, that there would be an additional burden placed on the utilities, but the difference is these are real costs, and not everybody's a taxpayer either. The other issue is that the city, as we're finding ourselves in situations where, you know, we're replacing about a mile of road a year, but more than half of our streets are over 40 years old and in need of replacement. And they need replacing much quicker after they've been patched a few times. Even if the compaction is great, you still have potentially years of maintenance of additional crack filling and chip sealing to seal that. And depending on what material was taken out and put back, you can put the best material back in the hole, but if it's different than the material around it, that patch behaves differently than the rest of the road. So even under the best conditions, where a utility does a perfect job, there is additional costs associated for the taxpayers to maintain that street throughout the life of the street. And so that's why I'm proposing it for the city stormwater utility and its wastewater utility, that the taxpayers and the folks that are paying assessments on streets, they're also ratepayers as well. But the city doesn't have the ability to, without reducing scope somewhere else, maybe it's within Public Works, maybe it's somewhere else, the city doesn't have the ability to increase maintenance budgets to maintain these streets and replace some of these streets that just need a resurfacing, specifically due to an abundance of patches. So that's why we're proposing this unilaterally, because and again, ratepayers and residents in most cases are one and the same. But the city simply cannot, there's no mechanism for the city to increase its budget, whereas the utilities are required to be sustainable. They're required to have, if part of their cost is covering the depreciation of road that they have disturbed, they're required by the Public Service Commission to cover those costs through rates. And so there is a mechanism to actually pay for those costs rather than divert it or delay it, just to not fix the road and let it degrade, and then have the taxpayer and property owner pay an assessment for it. So it's really trying to find a balance, and these aren't perfect. There may be reason to discuss this for some period of time, but we believe it's fair, and it's fair for the utilities to cover their share of that shortened street life because of those patches.
Thank you. Anybody? Mr. Kellogg?
I represent the council on the Water and Light Commission, and this is the first time I heard about this or read this. And I understand where our mayor's coming from and where Josh is coming from and where Joe is coming from. So I guess I would like to suggest, I don't think there's a urgency to vote on this for like next Tuesday. I think I would like to think about this and maybe contact Water and Light and talk to them more about it, or just talk to Joe more about it. Rather than, I didn't know if this was going to be on next Tuesday's agenda, but it'd be interesting if we could just postpone it for a month, so all of us can have a chance to digest it and think about it. That's my suggestion.
And that was probably going to be somewhat along my lines of comments that I was going to make. Obviously, it'll be on the report at the council meeting next week, but I think along with it that more thought about, or for people to think about it for next month. But I think at our next Public Works, that along with that, that maybe we could see a draft of what the ordinance change would exactly say and whatever, and to take a look at it. So to me, it'd be that we could look to prepare an ordinance, but it'd be to give us more thought and whatever, but to have that actually the ordinance, what it would say in front of us and that, and to bring it up next month at whatever date our meeting is. I can't think when first is next month. It seems like it might be Wednesday, so it won't be till the 8th maybe we meet. but whenever the meeting would be, is that we'd talk about it again and see where we went, and maybe there'd be changes we want to make in the ordinance, if any, or maybe we wouldn't want to go any further with it, or make a decision then to go forward with what the language would be, so. I would just, I'd make a motion, I guess, to do that, to go that route, and to, for staff to prepare a draft ordinance of what this would actually be, and during that time, that, the committee, staff, water and light, and that, we can have more discussion and questions before them, and that they all would be invited to, come to our next meeting, next month, to, further discuss it, so. I would make motion to that, if anybody want to, go ahead, Jake.
Thanks. I guess, being that this is just a motion to bring in ordinance language to the common council for discussion, my feeling is I don't see why I'd kick the can down the road here. We can approve this motion tonight to update chapter 6. They can bring that ordinance language, and then we could have that discussion at the common council meeting where they could also come. I just don't know why keep it in committee and then review it and go over everything we already went tonight. I mean, it's fresh, it's here. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay. Mr. Terry?
Yeah, so if it's any consolation, we wouldn't have that language ready for next Tuesday anyway. So it wouldn't come before the council until the July council meeting.
Then is there need for a motion at this point?
We probably don't need the motion. We'll just bring it up, it'll be on the agenda next month, if the committee is satisfied with doing it that way. Okay. We'll handle it that way, and with that, actually, let's see what I think we went through all the items here. And so we're to item 8, which would be to adjourn, and that's also move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and seconds been made to adjourn. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Thank you, and we're adjourned at 6:11 approximately.